Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of TADA Talks. My name is Todd Burgon. I'm the Executive Director of the TADA. TADA's podcast today is sponsored by CARFAX Canada. Our topic today is best practices for turning leads into customers, and joining me is Charles Fordjour, Senior Sales and Client Engagement Manager at CARFAX, as well as Drew Harden, the Manager of Customer Experience, Research and Insights at CARFAX. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you joining me today. It's nice to see you both.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, Todd, thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
It's been such a long time since we've seen each other in person. It's strange to be doing it this way, but at least we can get some information out to dealers that I think is topical and timely. So, first question I have for you, Charles. Let's start with you. Is that we're talking about best practices for turning leads into customers, and obviously you guys have done a lot of research and insight on this. So, what brought about the need for you guys as a company to explore the topic of following up with leads? I mean, leads have been around for forever, right?
Yeah, it's a great question, Todd. And really, when you look at the market, there's a lot of trade-in tools, a lot of lead generation tools out there. And frankly, we came out with our own CARFAX trade-in widget a little over a year and a half ago. And so what we noticed was that, some stores, they had a really defined process for how they were going to follow up with leads, but the vast majority, they didn't have anything in place, right? So we felt an obligation to really go out there and do some research to find out what are some really good best practices that align with our values around trust and transparency. So what we did is we partnered with a gentleman out of BC named Peter Herbert of T3 Engagement and Sales Development. And really, we built the process off of his system that we felt really would work with our customers and with the market. So we're really excited to share that with you today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This is great. So, I mean, in a traditional model, stores, they ask leads to come in right away, and in many cases, we refrain from sharing information until then. Is that still the best approach? Is that old way, or is that still the new way? Like, what's the best way for people to approach this?
Yeah, it's what I remember. I remember my manager badgering me, Charles, get him to come in, don't share anything, right? But, frankly, you still want to ask for the appointment, but really take this as an opportunity to do some fact finding. What are they looking for? Why do they choose your store? What's their preferred method of communication? Nowadays, people are okay with text messages or email. So learn as much as you can about them. Take this as an opportunity to build some rapport, and then ask them for that appointment. So I think taking that approach, you'll see a lot more success.
Yeah, and Todd, I can see how this can be a major challenge for a salesperson. Someone submits a lead, you give them some information, and there are going to be people who never answer their phone again. You'll be left there wondering, was this a missed opportunity? Your sales manager is probably breathing down your neck about why you didn't bring them in. But what if it wasn't really an opportunity at all? And let me give you an example here. Let's talk about trade-in leads. We've done some research on leads in this subject. So, Todd, let's say you're buying a car, and one of the first things you usually need to figure out is how much you can spend. And I've been lucky enough to visit quite a few stores and talk to a lot of dealership managers. And I've also learned from them that generally they would prefer if a customer came in having an idea of what their budget is and what they're kind of looking for. Could a trade-in value have an impact on that? Yeah, absolutely. What we ended up finding when we researched trade-in values is 70% of car buyers are looking for a trade-in value before they actually visit a dealership, because they're trying to figure out how much they can spend, or if it's even time to buy a car at all. So let's say that I go and submit a lead for a trade-in value. I'm probably not ready to buy yet. So your options as a salesperson or dealership manager are to try and bring a customer in who is likely not ready, who may not know what they want to spend, or you can give them the information they're looking for and then help guide them through the next steps of those process. So what I'd actually love to challenge everyone on is to reverse their thinking. So yes, customers are going to get information from you, and some of them are never going to pick up their phone again, and they're not going to call back. But also think of every single lead that you've brought in who didn't buy. Wouldn't it have been great if that was just a phone call and the customer realized maybe it's not time to buy a vehicle, and they didn't come in and spend 2 hours of your Saturday taking up a whole bunch of your time? So give information right away and then help guide the customer through the process, because maybe they're not ready to buy yet. But if you give them information, you can bring them in and have them ready to buy.
Oh, yeah, you make a really good point, because one of the things that we've learned through the pandemic is that the sales cycle has certainly been shortened. the time in the dealership to consummate the deal has certainly been shortened, because consumers, and rightly so, I mean, they don't want to be in public places any longer than they've had to, prior to us getting, vaccinations coming back into our country. So some great points. Charles, let me ask you this. So does the sharing of information with leads over the phone create any sort of heightened risk of any sort of cross shopping?
Yeah, and Drew, you touched on it with this research, but frankly, you're damned if you do, and you're really damned if you don't share information, right? So, if you really take the opportunity to give them the information, what you're doing is, limiting the risk that they're just going to go out there and call your competitor for the same information. So take that opportunity to be transparent, build trust, and really it all helps increase the odds of them coming to your store. Yeah,
Todd, what we've really seen is you don't get the choice to decide if a customer is going to cross shop you or not. So you can definitely make an appointment and try to bring them in, but that doesn't stop anyone from going online and going to the dealership down the road and calling them and submitting leads everywhere. And of course, if they talk to another dealership and they provide the information the customer is looking for, well, where's that going to put your store? And it's not really just a matter of having numbers from one store and not having numbers from another. So every interaction with a dealership, it sets the tone for that customer and what their relationship's going to be like through the buying process. Something that I'm really frequently asked when I'm talking to dealership management is, how do we build trust with customers? How do we help customers come to us for advice? And from questions like this, I've personally studied the car buying process with over 5,000 car buyers. And what we hear over and over and over again is, if you're building trust with a customer who doesn't know your business, they don't have a referral, they don't have a previous purchase, the best way to do that is being upfront with information. So when a customer asks a question and your response is giving them a clear, justified answer, it shows you're someone they can trust. And let's say it's later in the car buying process and something goes wrong. Maybe they can't get the finance rate they thought they were getting. They're going to be able to say, well, you know what? Todd was always really upfront and honest with me early in the process, so I'm going to trust him on this one. So yes, giving information does make it easier for customers to cross shop. But if that customer is cross shopping and you don't give them anything, well, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Charles, this part's near and dear to my heart, because I always compare it to like the people that are calling me every 3 or 4 days now to clean my ducts at home. So like, what is the right frequency for stores to be reaching out to leads who are unresponsive, so that it becomes what I call productive versus the restraining order approach?
Yeah, you know what? There's absolutely a balance, but the phrase that rings in my mind, that echoes in my mind, hasn't changed for years. It's, buy or die, right? The customers reached out to you, they're giving you information, you owe it to yourself. You as a store, you're spending a lot of money investing in these tools, so you have an obligation to follow up until they respond or make a purchasing decision. So, and really, if you go back, to that first reach out from the customer, it's imperative that you reach out within, I would say, 5 to 15 minutes, and not one of those automated impersonal responses, right? Customers know that that's not a human being that sent that to me. That's a computer generated response. I'm going to reach out to somebody else who's actually going to give me information or respond, right? So the quicker you can do that, and as frequent as you can continue to reach out and provide some valuable information around incentives, you just increase your odds.
Yeah, those are really good points. I mean, certainly, I think too, in the last year, as our industry and consumer buying behaviors have changed, that the expectation for people to respond is much higher than it's ever been. I mean, I fall personal victim to that. I mean, if I order something online and it's not at the front door at 9 the next morning, like, well, I wonder what happened.
Absolutely.
So you're not going to hit, you're not going to bat 100 every time. So if the lead that you have ends up trading in somewhere else, Charles, what do you do with those leads?
Speaking, from a sales rep perspective, or it's a little bit of a gut punch, right? When you hear, maybe they've bought somewhere else or they haven't responded to you, but it is a numbers game. You talked about it. You just said, you're not going to hit out of the park every time, right? So, really take the opportunity to figure out, where did they buy their car? What kind of car did they buy? Really talk to them about, some of the key points with your store. The fact that, hey, we service all makes and models. You can come to our store, We can service your car depending on where they live. Maybe they'll want to come to you. And again, pepper them with information over the course of their lifetime, and really taking a long-term approach. This customer is going to buy again, or they're going to provide a referral. So maintain really strong communication with that client. It's really imperative.
I think sometimes we forget about that infinity loop, as I call it, where the buying time on that infinity loop, is exponentially much less than the ownership of the entire vehicle. So
right.
The opportunity to re-engage or develop a relationship, throughout that still exists. So I'm going to ask you both this question separately, obviously, but I'm going to ask the same question, but I'll start with you, Charles. So, what would be one key point that you'd like listeners to take away, from this podcast? And I always go back to, not everyone's going to retain actually everything that we all say, but if there was one key thing based upon leads today, like what's your deliverable? And Drew, I'll ask you the same question from the seat that you sit in, someone that's in charge of a consumer experience and research and insights.
Yeah, just to really pause and consider their perspective. Remember, these leads, these people, they've given you their contact information because they really want your help to find a solution. Not because they just want to be sold, right? Like, you're really more likely to win their business if you put their needs ahead of your own and let them know that you care about them, and give them some insight into how they're going to be treated when they deal with you and then when they deal with your store.
And Drew, I mean, you obviously have a different focus in your role. Is there anything that you've seen in your role that you'd say that this is the key thing I'd like dealers to hear from me today?
Yeah, it's absolutely provide customers the information they're looking for up front. And then your opportunity as a salesperson or a sales manager to continue and bring that lead in is then hold their hand and take them to the next step of the process. But every time someone submits a lead, you've essentially entered an agreement with them that if they give you their contact information, you're going to provide some info. So first thing you should do is deliver on that promise, and then you can take them to the next step in the process.
Well, gentlemen, I've certainly enjoyed our time. I've been speaking with Charles Fordjour, Senior Sales and Client Engagement Manager at CARFAX Canada, as well as Drew Harden, Manager of Customer Experience, Research and Insights at CARFAX Canada. Our podcast today has been sponsored by CARFAX. You guys have been great partners of ours over the years, so I thank you for that. But before I let you go, as I always like to end on a fun note, non-business note. So Charles, let's start with you. You're originally from Houston. I mean, I don't know if you're happy to be here. You wish you were in Houston watching live sports right now and people in the stands, but let's start with an easy one, or finish with an easy one. What was the first car you ever bought, the make, the model, the year, and why did you buy that specific vehicle?
Well, that's a great question. I was 17 years old. I was on my way to play basketball at the University of Houston, just received a scholarship there, and I bought a 97 Chevrolet Corsica with burgundy cloth interior. I love that car, and to go with it, I put some, two 15-inch subwoofers in it, so you could hear me when I was coming down the block. I'd be setting off alarms, and I loved it. I missed it. I may not be able to hear as well today, but those were great times.
I think we're going to have to figure a way to get that car back in your fold. So, Drew, same question for you, and I'm guessing it's not the same vehicle.
You know what? Charles and I are much more alike than I think you'd realize, but I had a 2001 Honda Civic. It was manual. It was just a matter of the right car available at the right time from someone my parents knew from work. And I also had two 12-inch subwoofers in the trunk and would tend to rattle around the neighborhood for a while. And I think I drove that thing until the dashboard looked like a Christmas tree, and finally had to donate it to a charity outside of town. And I was able to verify with CARFAX that it was not worth repairing to them, and they ended up scrapping it. So it had a good life though.
Those are great stories. It's funny. I think that the newer generations now, because my kids are certainly old enough, they have their own cars and driving, is that our focus when we got cars was, putting a sound system in it and getting as much of an amplifier as you could to boost that sound system. And so, Charles, you bring back some old memories. It's like, I'm not really exposed to that anymore, right? So that's awesome. Just awesome.
Absolutely. Fun times.
It's a lot harder to tinker now than it was with those cars. But if the headlights aren't dimming, you can add more power still.
That's right. But the new vehicles now, the challenge we have is that you might shut the thing off as you're driving down the 400, right? So it's a little better to get someone else to hook those things up. But Hey, gents, I really enjoyed chatting with you today. I certainly appreciate your time. Look forward to when we can get together back in person. As you guys all know, that's our goal at the association, to start putting back on live events when it's safe, hopefully sooner than later. But I want to thank both of you and hope that I get to see you guys soon.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Todd. I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
This is Todd Burgon signing off for this edition of TADA Talks, and thanks again to our sponsor, CARFAX Canada.